During the backyard cookout, my sister raised her drink and giggled. Why, we finally own this place. My mother grinned, like she had practiced her reaction in a mirror. So just be thankful, Elna. Guests laughed softly. Silverware scraped against porcelain. I nodded, silent and unmoving. I read the title. The lawn went quiet. Even the barbecue quieted down. I reached into my purse and presented the manila folder. Chloe ripped it open, arrogant, until her voice shattered in the quiet air. Eviction. Excuse me? They assumed the surprise began right there. However, the actual treachery, the act that drove me to this specific second, started months prior to anyone lighting that charcoal. My name is Elena Vance, and if you observed my family from the street, you might have assumed we were the reserved type who kept to ourselves. A modest home in Denver, a mom who gardened on Sundays, 2 daughters who appeared similar enough in snapshots to trick anyone swiping by. But photographs freeze time. They never documented the sliding scale of who was important and who wasn't. Chloe, my older sibling, had always been the solar system's sun. Even when we were toddlers, the household seemed to lean in her direction toward her desires, her temperaments, her meltdowns. If she neglected a science assignment, Mom stayed up past midnight completing it. If she blew her budget, Mom slid her cash just until payday. The dynamic calcified with maturity. Chloe's career instability, her debt issues, her rash choices. Everything was justified with a heavy breath and a glance my way. I have patience, Elena. She is enduring so much. I discovered young that being the dependable one didn't yield applause. It yielded obligations. I kept my head low, labored intensely, covered my expenses, and never caused ripples. I believe that was what adult women did. You pulled your own load. You didn't request things you couldn't merit. You didn't transform into another person's problem. Yet Mom viewed my autonomy as a reserve, something accessible for mining, pulling, or twisting whenever Chloe fell down again. I still recall the afternoon I gave Mom my old ID and social security card so she could assist with tax filings. I relied on her the way any child would, blindly, innately. I didn't realize I had just surrendered the codes to my destiny. Back then I was residing in a studio near the city center, hoarding cash for a property of my own. Every dawn smelled like instant roast and hot daylight, spilling through sheer drapes. I worked exhaustive shifts as a back-end developer, managing timelines, glitches, and calls. I took pride in my existence, peaceful, grounded, constructed from nothing. Mom visited periodically, normally to brief me on Chloe's newest crisis or to inquire if I could assist briefly until situations improved. I scarcely refused. Limitations weren't something I had ever been taught to establish. However, the gap was widening, not physical miles. We all resided in the same metro area, but emotional distance. When we gathered for brunch, I saw how Chloe's gaze swept over my attire, my vehicle fob, my laptop case, as if calculating what I possessed that she merited more. Mom saw, too, but rather than halting it, she leaned in. Elena, you have ample success. Don't be greedy. Greedy? That term rested on me like a boulder. I didn't debate. I seldom did. Quiet was simpler, softer, less prone to spot Chloe's rage or Mom's guilt tactics. But quiet has a price, and mine was accruing interest. I assumed the origins of our family friction were handleable, irritating, painful occasionally, but handleable. I possessed no concept of how profound they went or how wide they would stretch. Not until the date everything cracked apart. I first understood something was off on a Tuesday morning, the sort where nothing feels theatrical whatsoever. I had started work late, prepared toast, unlocked my computer, and signed into my bank's dashboard, anticipating an easy acceptance. My history was excellent, my reserves deep, and I had spent years getting ready for this leap. Purchasing a residence wasn't merely a marker. It was evidence that I had engineered a life nobody could claim credit for except me. So when the monitor blinked, request rejected, my mind dismissed it before my vision could digest it. I reviewed it, then again. I analyzed the data row by row until the text focused into something I see. Active housing loan obligation under applicant's identity. A mortgage. I did not hold. I had never even petitioned for one, not prior to this. I phoned the bank instantly, marching the width of my studio while an agent accessed my dossier. Her tone changed, courteous but guarded. There is an active home loan attached to your social, she stated. Executed 16 months back. My gut plummeted. Executed by whom? I questioned. By you, miss. I felt something inside me slant like a plank unfastening beneath my shoes. When she recited the location aloud, a property in Aurora, I clutched the island just to remain vertical. Aurora, the suburb where Mom and Chloe resided. For a second, I couldn't perceive anything past the roaring noise in my head. I requested a duplicate of the signature sheet, feigned my tone was firm, then disconnected. My fingers trembled so severely the mobile nearly fell. The file landed in my inbox moments later. I clicked it. There it was, my name in swirling script, nearly precise, barring one detail. My penmanship didn't loop at the tail like that, and I had never autographed anything regarding a dwelling. Not 16 months back, not ever. I dialed Mom. She picked up on the third ring, appearing standard, nearly joyful. "Hi, honey. Is all well?" "There is a loan in my name," I stated. 500 grand for your place." A lengthy pause of quiet. Then her sigh, gentle and firm like she had been anticipating this instance. "It is finished already, Elena. We are covering the costs." Chloe required a grounded spot to begin again. "You will comprehend when you bear kids." My windpipe went rigid. "Why my identity?" "You possess excellent scores," she said plainly. "You weren't utilizing it, and we are kin. You ought to be thankful you are able to aid us." Thankful. That term again pushed against my chest like a trauma. I didn't scream. I didn't fight. I disconnected because it was the singular thing preventing the warmth climbing in my torso from spilling over. For hours I paced around my studio in quiet, attempting to construct the fragments of a scene I didn't wish to view. Mom had utilized the license I gave her. She had utilized my social, my data, my faith. She had autographed a debt employing my persona and purchased a home, then resided in it with Chloe as if it were theirs. And the globe continued like nothing had occurred. But something had snapped, a fracture line traveling directly through the core of my clan. And deep down beneath the agony and shock, something else was shaping too, a movement, a force, the initial spark of determination. For the subsequent days, I drifted through my existence like someone observing herself from afar. I commuted to the office. I scripted software. I remained in calls. But every silent second, every break between jobs, the identical fact resonated, firm and brutal. They exploited me, not by chance, not out of bewilderment, yet but intentionally, strategically, realizing I wouldn't resist. That epiphany stung worse than the faked autograph itself. By Friday, the rejection had lifted enough for rage to anchor in, quiet, laser-focused rage that didn't blaze up, but sliced its path through me. I unlocked my computer and commenced researching. Property statutes, fraud via identity, estate holding, occupancy laws. My browser log resembled the start of a litigation, which in certain manners it was. That is when I located the section that made me see it totally motionless. In our jurisdiction, if a debt is acquired under a person's identity, even criminally, the lawful title still tracks the name on the note, implying the residence was lawfully mine. Not Mom's, not Chloe's, mine. For the initial time and days, I felt something adjacent to air returning to my lungs. Still, information wasn't sufficient. I required certainty. I booked a meeting with a solicitor downtown, a tranquil, voiced guy who heard, without cutting in as I presented everything. My social, the expired license I had given Mom, the loan papers, the falsified sign-off, the conversation. When I concluded, he pushed his fingertips together and agreed deliberately. "You are the lawful holder," he stated. "They are inhabiting a premise that isn't theirs." The office tilted slightly, like the atmosphere had densified around me. He pushed a typed collection of memos across the desk. "You don't need to lodge complaints against your mother if you don't wish to. Fraud among relatives. It occurs more than you imagine, but you can reclaim your asset legally." Silently, I echoed, allowing the terms to land. He clarified the method. Drafted warning, authorized filing. A schedule mandated by the municipality. Nothing theatrical, nothing aggressive, merely documents and limits. Two concepts my clan had never honored, but were about to discover the mass of. When I stepped out of his building, the daylight struck my skin like a weird type of forgiveness. For the initial time since the bank's ring, I felt in command. Not vengeful, not fuming, just grounded. Later that weekend, I motored to the block in Aurora where the dwelling rested. I didn't halt in the garage. I paused at the sidewalk, motor off, palms clutching the rim. Through the main glass, I observed Chloe drifting around the family room like she possessed the space, shoeless, giggling into her mobile, tossing a quilt onto a sofa I had unwittingly financed. Mom walked through the corridor behind her, toting a hamper of pressed clothes. They appeared rooted, cozy, untroubled. A stillness landed over me, icy and clarifying. This wasn't their sanctuary. They hadn't merited it. They had seized it from me. I marched back to my vehicle, unlocked the passenger side, and withdrew a dense manila folder, the certified papers I had collected earlier that afternoon. I traced my digit along the rim, sensing the slight bump of sheets inside. This wasn't payback. Not in the fashion folks visualized it. It was merely the reality returning to its proper spot, and shortly they would have to encounter it. I didn't arrive at the cookout to create a spectacle. I arrived because quiet had functioned as a barrier for too long, and walking into that lawn meant placing a stop to the variation of me they had constructed, someone obedient, flexible, handy. The July light hung deep when I drove up to the residence, the one carrying a debt I never inked, the one they had handled like a trophy Chloe was somehow owed. Vehicles bordered the curb. Tunes floated across the grass, something cheerful mismatched with the weight in my torso. The aroma of roasted meat and wood smoke rested into the hot breeze. Kids from our wider clan raced each other around the garden, and family members I hadn't viewed in months waited near. Plastic tables piled with melon bowls and disposable dishes. Everything appeared celebratory, simple, fluid, like nothing in my existence had been ripped apart for this second to live. I entered silently. No massive arrival, no declaration. I simply tracked the paver walk to the lawn, where the sound grew into joy and clinking cups. Mom spotted me initially. She lit up, fluttering her hand with the type of zeal kept for visitors, not offspring. "There she is," she shouted. "Come sit with us, honey." Honey, the term grated against my bones. Chloe stood near the deck, leaning into her partner's hip, sporting a frock stamped with teal blossoms. She appeared like she fit in a catalog, the sort that highlighted fluid living. She gripped a beverage in her palm and clicked her tips against the crystal as she joked. With a ring of cousins. When she noticed me, her grin expanded, but not with affection, more like entertainment. "You arrived," she stated, lifting her mug. "I figured you would be too occupied being, well, dependable." A few folks laughed. I presented a civil tilt, disregarding the known surge of warmth under my flesh. Mom hooked a limb through mine, guiding me toward a lengthy teak bench near the barbecue. "Take a dish," she insisted. "There is ample food." Chloe organized this entire gathering. Naturally, she did. With my property, my debt, my rating, I mumbled something vague and reached for a glass of tap water instead. As the day progressed, cousins moved around trading tales, reconnecting, teasing. I observed Chloe float through the group like she was chairing a royal gala. She gave walkthroughs of the place, indicating her art, her selections, her remodeling ideas. Every time she spoke my home, something in me stretched tighter like a wire, spooling down to its final centimeter. But I paused, tolerant, composed. Every phase of this date had been charted out long before I showed up. It was almost dusk when Chloe summoned everyone to the deck. "Hi, come close," she yelled, raising her drink. "I wish to propose a toast." The hum of chat landed. Seats dragged. People shaped a casual arc around her. I remained off to the flank, near enough to listen, distant enough to watch. Chloe raised her flute, her jewelry trapping the dying glow. "I just wish to voice how thankful I am." She started grinning massively. "This place has transformed everything for me." "For us?" Her partner gripped her arm. Mom glowed arrogantly from beside the cooker. "And frankly," Chloe went on, joy rising up as she looked at me, "it feels incredible to finally possess a spot that is ours. We finally own this place." Several cousins cheered. My fist clenched around the folder inside my purse. Then Mom appended with a gentle, ignoring grin that slid like grease across the instant. "Just be thankful, Elena. Not furious. Not teasing. Just erasing me as though I ought to feel privileged to have my destiny recycled for someone else's ease." The group observed me now, pausing, anticipating the mute girl who always absorbed the blow, the one who digested unease for the benefit of peace. I didn't elevate my tone. I didn't equal their drama. I simply agreed. The gesture was tiny, barely visible, but internally everything snapped with a frosty final lock. "Read the title," I stated. It wasn't booming. It didn't need to be. The garden froze. Joy perished mid-inhale. Someone dropped a spoonful of pasta salad without noticing it. Even the toddlers halted at the borders of the grass, feeling the change. Mom blinked sluggishly. "What did you just utter?" I placed my beverage down and slid the manila folder from my purse. The sheet made a soft rustle more potent than any yell could have been. Chloe chuckled again, but this time it shook. "What is that meant to imply?" I moved ahead and laid the folder on the wood. "If this premise is ours," I stated, "then we shouldn't have any issue viewing the title." Her grin stumbled. Mom reached for the package, fingers shaking before she stopped herself. "Elena, this isn't the venue." Chloe grabbed it instead. Okay, she hissed, tearing the flap with a show. Let's fix your misunderstanding. She withdrew the files, sheets of statute text, autographs, and the formal warning I had submitted earlier that week. Her gaze scanned rapidly, then dragged, then dilated. What is this? Her tone fractured. I stayed rigid, sensing the massive quiet densify around us. Cousins leaned in. Murmurs flowed. Chloe's partner moved awkwardly beside her. Mom moved nearer, looking over Chloe's back, her complexion emptied of pigment. Eviction, Chloe mumbled, as if speaking the term would cushion it. But when she located the sentence declaring their deadline to exit, her voice spiked into a shrill, terrified shriek. Eviction, excuse me? The yell broke whatever mirage of bond the cookout had been attempting to broadcast. Several visitors moved back. A few others traded anxious looks. Mom seized the documents from Chloe's grip, reading them as if hunting for a gap that didn't exist. You cannot do this, she whispered, vibrating her head. Helena, you cannot. We are kin. Kin? The term emerged as a charge, not a tie. You utilized my persona, I stated softly. You forged my name. You purchased this dwelling with a debt attached to my future, and neither of you informed me. Chloe's respiration came in jagged bursts. We were covering the costs, she urged, tone splitting. Everyone assists family. She couldn't conclude. This isn't aid, I answered. This is deception, and the sole reason I am not filing complaints is because I chose to finish this silently, lawfully, justly. Mom held the warning, her tone vibrating. Where are we expected to go? I held her gaze. Eyes I had hunted for validation so many times. The identical place I went when I required firmness, I stated. Somewhere you build for yourselves. A remote canine yapped. A visitor cleared their throat. The cooker hissed its last flame before fading down. Chloe collapsed into a seat, trembling. Her partner attempted to soothe her, but she shoved him away, still turning through sheets as if commanding them to alter. Mom gazed at me, her expression caught between shock and sorrow. You ambushed us. You ambushed me 16 months ago, I stated. Says I am just restoring the reality to its proper spot. The sun dropped fully behind the wall, casting the lawn into a twilight dimness. Cousins wandered away, mumbling reasons, unsure which flank to support. I didn't remain longer than I needed to. I didn't relish the instant or hunt for remorse. I pivoted, marched down the paver walk, and stepped back into the chill night air beyond the lawn. Behind me, tones climbed. Panic, rage, refusal.
But none of it touched me the way it used to.
Fairness wasn't booming. It was grounded, and I had finally discovered how to carry it. The days after the gathering felt oddly still, as if the globe had slid a few centimeters, and I was still mastering the fresh equilibrium. I didn't verify on Mom or Chloe. I didn't trace the schedule. The method was already in gear, formally recorded, and no longer mine to mentally bear. All I could do was permit the outcomes to unroll the way they were intended to. Within a week, I got proof that the warning had been received. 2 weeks later, I motored past the dwelling on my route to grab food. Their vehicles were still there, the shades pulled tight, but the spot appeared different, reduced somehow, less like a sanctuary and more like a memento of everything I had permitted for too long. I didn't break. By the 3rd week, the premise was vacant. The garage swept, the glass naked. A broker sign stood in the garden, vivid white against the sod. I stopped for the initial time since everything cracked, apart, and walked toward the deck. No recollections here were truly mine, but for the initial time, the area felt truthful. No mysteries, no maneuvering, no privilege hanging in the atmosphere. Vendoring it was simpler than I anticipated. The cash cleared fast. I settled the debt, shut the ledger, and utilized the rest as the deposit for a tiny condo on the opposite side of the metro. It wasn't majestic or showy, but it was mine, merited, not pilfered. On my initial evening there, I stood by the pane with a mug of brew, observing the brightness of the metro twinkle against the glass. For the initial time in months, my trapezius lowered, my respiration deepened, and the stillness didn't feel like dread. It felt like liberty. In the weeks that ensued, I didn't hear from Mom or Chloe. Maybe they were furious, maybe embarrassed, maybe still claiming they were the casualties. But their quiet didn't burn the way it once did. I had recovered something bigger than a dwelling. I had recovered myself. And if you have ever had to drag yourself out of a clan's darkness, you realize that variety of win is silent but soul-altering. If this tale connects with you, comment your journey below and don't forget to subscribe to hear further real-life family sagas.